Hello, it's Scott Manley here. If you've been paying attention to space news in the last week, you may have heard that Blue Origin and Boeing, of all people, have announced a private space station known as the Orbital Reef. Now, the idea behind the naming Orbital Reef is that in the oceans, life actually tends to congregate on reefs. They provide a base for a much more complex ecosystem, and their idea is their private space station will become a base for science and commerce and other private operations. It'll be a port of call, a home away from home for diplomats, hustlers, entrepreneurs, and oh wait, no, that's Babylon 5. But no, seriously, they have this private orbital space station. And the thing is, it's not the only one that's been talked about in the last few weeks, and there's a good reason for it, right? We've had Starlab, which is a project by Lockheed Martin and Nanoracks and their parent company Voyager. There's Axiom, who have, of course, their private expansion to the space station that they keep talking about becoming a space station in its own right. And a lot of people didn't even notice when Think Orbital posted some concept art to their Twitter profile saying that they'd submitted their design to NASA. Because NASA is actually looking for designs for new free-flying space stations. This is part of NASA's push to basically promote commercial operations in low Earth orbit, to try to move the kind of services that NASA would build itself into privately operated hands. NASA's spending billions of dollars per year to keep the space station flying, and at some point they don't want to be doing that. They would like to just have a space station in orbit that they pay for their astronauts to go to, that they rent space on board, and the private company handles all the boring day-to-day operations of the space station. So this started out with the Next Step program, which was launched in 2015. And one of the concrete results from that is that Axiom Space are launching private modules to the space station, probably as it could be as early as 2024, but we all know that these things tend to get delayed. But Axiom are going to fly a set of private astronauts to the space station in February 2022. So part of Next Step, they had different levels of commercial operations that were available, and Appendix K specifically talked about the free-flying station. And that was first described, and the requirements were talked about and laid out in 2019. But now they've officially said that's not happening. Now there's a new program called the Commercial LEO Destinations, and that's what this is all about. NASA has I think it's about $100 million that Congress has allocated right now, which is clearly not enough to get this program going up to speed, but it is enough to pay a handful of companies to now flesh out their design. So they announced the requirements in March, and I think it was August 27th was the deadline for submitting your requirements. We know that companies that were interested included SpaceX, Boeing, Airbus, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, basically all the companies that have skin in the game. And while they had to submit these things to NASA, they weren't required to talk about them publicly. So it's generally presumed that these revelations of Orbital Reef and Starlab are all part of this program. One big name that didn't turn up was Bigelow Aerospace. Now, they had been developing all sorts of inflatable modules for commercial space hotels, but they suspended operations last year, although they claimed that at the time that this was a temporary thing due to COVID. The fact that they haven't got anything on the table for this is a pretty sure sign to me that they are dead. If anything was going to rouse them from their slumber, this would be it. So let's actually look at the various contenders that have so far revealed something. So we have Think Orbital, who I'm naming first because, frankly, we don't know anything about them, and we probably won't know very much about them because I don't think they're going to get very far. There's so many better options that already have existing links. And that doesn't mean that they're not smart people. It's just that a lot of this will be based upon a company's history, and I don't see much in there. But what they have is power and propulsion element. They have an inflatable spherical habitation module on the top, and presumably there's a docking port on there. Perfectly good design. So good that it looks a lot like the Starlab design from Lockheed Martin and Nanoracks. So The big deal with this is that Nanoracks already has a lot of work going on the International Space Station. They have become one of the first places you go if you want to launch experiments to the International Space Station. They have their own airlock. Now, there's a larger holding company that owns Nanoracks. It's called Voyager, and so they're actually the top name on this bid, along with Lockheed Martin. But Nanoracks are seen as the company that has the experience on how to do commercial space station operations, or at least how to make them pay, how to make a profit. So their design is a power and propulsion element, which, I'm going to say a lot of these power and propulsion elements, they're probably going to be like Maxar satellites with extra propellant. They'll take like a satellite chassis, put big solar panels and propulsion on it, and that'll be it. The habitation module is an inflatable style module, which Bigelow in no way had exclusive rights to. There's a docking port on the top, there's robot arms, and we see some sort of inspector satellite or whatever flying around near it. Yeah, this is a small version, which may actually qualify because they're looking for, they're not necessarily looking for continuous habitation on some of these things. So the next one I want to talk about is Orbital Reef. That's the one everybody's talking about, partly because they're making jokes about Blue Origin and Boeing's ability to deliver on schedule. But frankly, this is at the stage where they are looking for funding to flesh out their design and everything. So Orbital Reef, the design that they show has a backbone of hard-walled pressure modules. And it looks like there's 3 of them. The design repeats. Judging by the scale of things, they're probably about 6 and a bit meters wide. And I'm going to point out that the fairing size for New Glenn allows for 6.3 meters. So I think 6.3 meters seems reasonable. For comparison, the International Space Station modules are about 4.2 meters in diameter, and Skylab was 6.7. So this is much more on the scale of Skylab in terms of internal diameter. But the renderings they have show floors inside horizontally to split these so that they've got more like explicit storage space that's cut off or whatever, demarked. They have a lot of docking ports and connection hardware all over these. There's a ring of 4. It looks like an IDA style docking port that would be used by Dragon or Starliner. They have 4, they look like common berthing adapters. 2 on each end, or 1 on each end, and then 2 on the side. So they've got 3 of these modules together. It's not clear actually whether the ring of the docking ports is a separate module, or it's the 2 are connected into one. Hard to tell. Anyway, below this, you've got a truss structure that goes down, and on that you have your thermal radiators and your solar panels. Now, these are arranged in a chain, and on either side they have various modules that are bolted on, including some inflatable modules, which are apparently being developed by Sierra Space, which is a subsidiary of Sierra Nevada. Which also explains why we have the Dream Chaser shown in the renderings. It's docking onto the end, and the pitch, the PDF, very specifically mentions that the Dream Chaser would be used for cargo and crew. So crew Dream Chaser is still something that is very much being pursued by Sierra. Also, Boeing with Starliner on the other end. I can totally understand why they'd be a partner, because they're the only other viable one that isn't SpaceX, and apparently they don't want to show SpaceX. I'm going to say realistically, if this station was flying, the customer might well be choosing the vehicle that visits the space station with their crew, and they may well go for Dragon. And I think everything will be compatible, just as they can make the space station compatible with both Dragon and Starliner. But yeah, Starliner is the other option. And it is interesting to point out, by the way, while we're here, that Starliner has a limited number of flights already booked using the Atlas V launch vehicle. The Atlas V here, but with a different bid on the top. And the problem is there's no more Atlas Vs after the ones that they've already agreed with NASA. So they're going to have to find another launch vehicle. And that's most likely the Vulcan, although there's not been any actual talk about Vulcan being human rated, or rather nobody's agreed to pay for it. But one of the reasons behind the change is there's no more Atlas because Amazon, also owned by Jeff Bezos, bought up all the final block of Atlas to launch their Kuiper constellation, therefore forcing Starliner to pick a new launch vehicle. Now, another launch vehicle possibility could be New Glenn, although there's quite a big difference in the diameter of the stage versus the capsule. But either way, Vulcan is also using Blue Origin engines. I don't know, I'm just wondering if there's some other ulterior motive here and whether Blue Origin is secretly planning to just buy Starliner from Boeing at some point. But the thing is, Blue Origin also have their own Biconic crew vehicle, which we've seen one rendering of 10 years ago. we don't know what's going on there, but Blue Origin have never been the most talkative. Anyway, yes, that is Orbital Reef. Finally, we have Axiom. And Axiom I have previously talked about in this very detailed video. They already have money to build a space station, but it's going to be an extension to the existing International Space Station. They've talked about 3 modules. They're required to launch at least one of them. But the third module that goes up is a power and propulsion element. It's a power tower, it has all the solar panels, it has all the extra thermal stuff that would be needed to turn a module into an actual space station. So they have 3 modules that they want to put up, including a very nice observation cupola. They want to have tourists on this. And that is one of the things where we know that there is absolutely a large market of people with a lot of money who would love to spend money going to a space hotel for a week or more. The thing is, the International Space Station is basically allowing 2 flights per year of tourists to the international section. Russia is going to do its own thing, but there's not necessarily the same level of access involved. So Axiom, while we know that they have a contract with NASA, their contract is for something that's not going to fly separately from the space station until the space station separates. One of the questions that did actually come up in the early days was how much of an overlap should this commercial orbital destinations program have or assume with the space station? And they say 2 years. So they're hoping that these commercial destinations will come online and they'll be able to decommission the space station. And while for them, decommissioning the space station probably involves smashing it into the atmosphere, I would really like to see it lifted up and become a museum. Or alternatively, one of these commercial operators says, we'll handle the space station from now on. We'll actually pay and send our people up. And there's an interesting sort of dynamic here because they've talked about having 2 NASA astronauts on orbit continuously. And that doesn't necessarily mean at a specific space station. But the astronauts on the space station are actually involved in the maintenance of the space station. So you can imagine that when commercial destinations get going, you will have NASA research astronauts that are actually working on working on science. And then you'll have a bunch of commercial astronauts that are employed by the station operators, and they'll be the ones making the hardware work, fixing things, possibly the ones doing the EVAs, or it could be that they actually hire NASA astronauts and pay NASA astronauts to go to space and, pay NASA for the privilege of using their highly trained individuals to become space janitors. I'm not sure if there's astronauts that would relish that proposal. I'm sure there's a bunch of astronauts that are really interested in just doing space maintenance, but I think a lot of them are really interested in going out there and exploring. I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but listen, if you need space janitor, I'm here, right? I'll totally do it. I'll be that. I'll have the cool stories. Yeah, I'm really good at telling stories. Anyway, yes, commercial low Earth orbit destinations. That is something to watch. We expect to see the first announcements before the end of the year, the first awards. It's not going to be much money. This is going to be a multi-phase approach where at each stage, new options are chosen. And it's entirely possible that you don't get chosen at one stage because it's believed that you already have the technology on hand. SpaceX, for example, it never got money early on in the commercial crew development. or there's some points of commercial crew development they never got money, but in the end it got the contract because it still had the big rocket and the existing history of Dragon and everything. And yeah, we don't know what SpaceX is going to do. I know there's going to be some discussion. Possibly Starship is operational at that time, and yes, a Starship just in orbit would provide quite a large volume. You would probably have to modify it to give it solar panels and things like that. Attitude control that doesn't require propulsive attitude control. It's also possible that they could do something that's derived from the Dragon XL. The Dragon XL is the spacecraft that they're talking about sending to the lunar gateway. And that is a Dragon that's designed to stay in space for long periods of time. It could be a fine basis of a space station. But yeah, we don't know what SpaceX is doing right now. We don't know even if they're applying. I expect they are, and I expect that they're probably just saying Starship, but maybe there's someone else in the company that has another idea that makes more sense or is more likely to get money from NASA. Yeah, watch this space. I'm Scott Manley. Fly safe.